On the night of July 1st, 2025, the world changed forever, though most people didn't know it yet. High in the mountains of Chile, at the Rio Hurtado Observatory, a group of tired astronomers watched the endless stream of data flashing on their screens. To them, it was just another night, another scan of the skies. The ATLAS system, short for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, was built to search for dangerous rocks that might one day collide with Earth. But that night, it saw something far more mysterious. At first, the object appeared as nothing more than a faint streak of light in the background of the stars. Its path, however, was strange, too strange. Unlike normal comets or asteroids bound to the pull of the sun, this one was moving on a hyperbolic orbit, coming in fast, and it wasn't slowing down. The data was clear. This object wasn't from our solar system at all. It was a visitor from the stars. The astronomers named it 3I Atlas. The 3I stood for third interstellar object ever found. Before it, there had only been two: the mysterious cigar-shaped rock known as Oumuamua in 2017 and the comet Borisov in 2019. Both had come and gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. But 3I Atlas was different, unlike Oumuamua, which never grew a tail, and unlike Borisov, which was faint and distant, this new comet was alive with activity. Even though it was still far from the sun, it already glowed with a bright green coma, an aura of gas and dust surrounding its icy heart. Telescopes revealed not just one tail, but two, streaming behind it like the banners of a ship crossing the black ocean of space. Scientists across the world rushed to study it. NASA, ESA, and even the James Webb Space Telescope turned their eyes toward this alien traveler. They found water ice, carbon dioxide, and strange molecules that shouldn't exist in such abundance. Some whispered that its chemistry was unlike any comet they had ever seen before, as if it had been born under a different kind of star. But there was something else, something that made a few scientists uneasy. The orbit of 3I Atlas seemed too precise, too direct. Unlike other comets that wandered aimlessly through the galaxy, this one was heading straight toward the inner solar system, almost as if it had chosen its path. And as weeks passed, astronomers noticed something even stranger. Inside the green coma, hidden deep within the glow, was a repeating pulse of light. It wasn't random. It flashed at regular intervals, like a heartbeat. Some dismissed it as a trick of the telescopes, an artifact in the data. But others began to whisper the unthinkable. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just a comet? What if it was something more? Far from Earth, out in the freezing darkness where sunlight was only a faint glow. The truth waited inside the icy shell of 3I Atlas. Buried beneath miles of rock and crystallized gases, something ancient stirred. It had traveled for millions of years, crossing the gulfs between stars. It had passed through cold nebulae, brushed the edges of dead systems, and drifted silently in the void. For eons, it had been asleep, hidden, patient. But now, as it entered the warmth of a new star system, it was waking up. The green glow wasn't just gas escaping into space. It was a signal. The twin tails weren't just ice and dust. They were exhaust trails. And the heartbeat of light pulsing from within wasn't an accident. It was communication. To the astronomers of Earth, 3I Atlas was a comet. To the stars, it was a ship carrying passengers, and it was coming closer. In the weeks that followed the discovery of 3I Atlas, newspapers ran headlines that most people ignored. A visitor from beyond the stars, they said. But for the average person, it was just another space story. Another comet no one would ever see with the naked eye. Except for one man. Dr. Jonathan Reeves was 63 years old, a retired physics professor who had once lectured about the mysteries of the universe to crowded classrooms. Now he spent most of his days in quiet solitude, sipping coffee on his porch in Arizona and watching the desert sky turn from orange to black each evening. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier, and his children were grown. scattered across the country with busy lives of their own. For Jonathan, the stars had become his only real company. When he read about Three-Eye Atlas, something stirred inside him, a sense of wonder he hadn't felt since he was a boy. Lying on the grass, with a telescope borrowed from the library, dreaming about what might be out there, he began following the comet obsessively, tracking every update from NASA, the European Space Agency, and even amateur astronomers posting online. And that was when he noticed it. Among the thousands of images shared on astronomy forums, there were a few that showed the faint, rhythmic pulse of light within the comet's coma. Most people dismissed it as camera noise. Jonathan didn't. He printed the images, pinned them on his wall, and compared them night after night. It was no accident. The flashes were regular. They formed a pattern, and Jonathan recognized the sequence. Back in the 1970s, when he was a young man, he had studied the Arecibo message, the radio signal humanity had once beamed into space as a greeting to any intelligent life that might be listening. The pulse of Three-Eye Atlas was eerily similar, almost as if someone had heard us, almost as if they were answering. Meanwhile, governments around the world were holding secret meetings. Officially, Three-Eye Atlas was just another comet, a scientific curiosity, nothing more. But behind closed doors, agencies like NASA, ESA, and even the Pentagon were debating the same terrifying possibility Jonathan Reeves had stumbled upon. What if the comet was artificial? What if it wasn't just ice and dust? There were whispers about a military response, about preparing for the worst. Some argued for caution, others spoke of opportunity. A few even dared to imagine contact. And while politicians argued and scientists scrambled for data, the comet kept moving. Closer, brighter, faster. One night, Jonathan was sitting on his porch when he felt something strange, a low vibration, almost like the hum of a faraway engine. At first, he thought it was just an airplane. But when he looked up, the desert sky was perfectly clear, full of stars. The hum grew stronger, vibrating in his chest like a hidden drum. Then his old radio, the one that hadn't worked in years, suddenly crackled to life. Through the static came a voice, not in English, not in any language Jonathan knew. It was layered like many voices speaking at once, rising and falling in harmony. And then, just for a moment, he understood. Prepare. The word was faint, fragile, but unmistakable. And then it was gone. The radio fell silent. The hum faded. Jonathan sat frozen, his hands trembling. He knew what he had heard. The comet wasn't just a comet. It was a messenger, and its message was for Earth, far away. Within the icy walls of Three-Eye Atlas, the truth was unfolding. Inside the frozen shell lay chambers, vast caverns carved long before humans had walked the Earth. Within them rested machines, their surfaces etched with symbols that no human mind could understand. Around those machines moved figures, tall, slender, cloaked in shimmering light. They were not flesh and blood as we know it, but something older, something born from the union of matter and energy in ways our science had yet to imagine. They had crossed the dark between stars not in years or decades, but in millennia. Their journey had been long, patient, inevitable, and now they were close. Their purpose was simple: to arrive. Jonathan Reeves didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He sat at his desk staring at the old photographs of his wife and children, wondering what kind of world they would inherit if his suspicions were right. Would this be the beginning of a new age of wonder, of first contact and shared knowledge? Or would it be the end? As dawn broke, he made a decision. He picked up the phone and called the only person he knew who might believe him, his former student, now a respected astronomer at NASA. "It's not a comet," Jonathan whispered when the man answered groggily. "It's a ship. And they're already talking to us." Jonathan's call did not go the way he had hoped. His former student, Dr. Mark Feldman, listened politely at first. Mark had once sat in Jonathan's lectures, back when he was a nervous freshman in oversized glasses. But now, Mark was the one with access to NASA's observatories and government channels. "Professor Reeves," he said carefully, his voice tight with fatigue. "I understand you're excited about this comet, but I assure you, our instruments show nothing unusual. No signals, no messages, just ice and dust." Jonathan pressed harder. "Mark, I've seen the data myself. The pulses are real. And last night, I heard something. It wasn't my imagination. They're communicating." There was silence on the other end. Then Mark sighed. "Look, off the record, I'll tell you this. You're not the only one who's noticed the pulses. But officially, we can't say anything. Do you understand? If I talk, I lose my career. Just stay quiet, Professor, for your own sake." And with that, he hung up. Jonathan sat back in his chair, his heart heavy. He had been right, but the truth was being buried. Across the ocean, in windowless rooms deep under Washington, D.C., men and women in dark suits were already discussing 3I Atlas in hushed tones. The Pentagon had formed a task force, quietly gathering astronomers, military strategists, and intelligence officers. A general leaned over the polished table. "If Reeves is right, if this is a vessel of some kind, then we cannot treat it as a scientific curiosity. We must treat it as a potential threat," a scientist countered, her voice trembling with passion. "With respect, General, you're thinking like a soldier. If this is intelligence from another star, it might be our greatest chance in history to learn, to understand. Not everything unknown is dangerous," but the general shook his head. "And not everything unknown is safe." Meanwhile, the world outside remained blissfully unaware. People worried about bills, about politics, about their health and families. Only a handful of astronomers and officials knew that something ancient and deliberate was moving closer every day. Jonathan, however, couldn't go back to ordinary life. The pulse still haunted him, and the voice, "Prepare," echoed in his mind. He started keeping a notebook, scribbling down everything he noticed. The timing of the flashes, the frequencies, even his dreams, which were becoming stranger by the night. One evening, while reviewing his notes, he realized something chilling. The flashes weren't just random intervals, they formed a sequence. And when he converted that sequence into numbers and then into coordinates, his breath caught. The signal wasn't pointing at Earth in general. It was pointing at a specific place, a location in the Arizona desert, not far from where he lived. 2 nights later, he drove out there, the desert road stretching endlessly under the pale wash of moonlight. He parked his car and walked into the barren land, guided only by starlight and instinct, and then he saw it on the ground. Etched into the dust and stone was a faint pattern of scorched earth, circles within circles, geometric lines so precise they could not have been made by wind or chance. They pulsed faintly with a greenish glow, the same eerie shade as the comet's coma. Jonathan fell to his knees, overwhelmed. This was no coincidence. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a mark, a sign left for him, or for humanity. Suddenly, the air shifted. The low hum returned, stronger now, vibrating through his bones. He looked up at the sky, and though the comet was still millions of miles away, he could see its faint glow, brighter than any star. And then once more, the voice filled the silence. "Prepare." This time it was clearer, louder, and undeniably real. The next morning, Jonathan tried again to reach Mark, but this time Mark didn't answer. Instead, 2 men in plain suits arrived at Jonathan's doorstep. They introduced themselves politely, but their smiles were thin, practiced. "Professor Reeves," one of them said, "we understand you've taken an interest in Comet 3I Atlas. We'd like you to come with us. There are matters of national security we need to discuss." Jonathan felt his stomach twist. He wasn't being asked, he was being taken. As they led him toward the waiting car, he glanced back at his home one last time. The porch where he'd watched the stars, the desk where his notes lay scattered. He had the terrible feeling he might never see them again. And far above, hidden within the icy glow of 3I Atlas, the passengers stirred. They had reached their destination. The time for silence was ending. The car ride was silent. Jonathan sat in the back seat, flanked by the 2 men in suits. Their faces gave nothing away, trained to reveal no emotion, no hint of thought. Outside, the Arizona desert slid by, its emptiness a mirror of Jonathan's own unease. Finally, they arrived at a building that looked ordinary from the outside, an office block of glass and steel. But inside, Jonathan was led down elevators, through security doors, into the windowless depths below. A large room awaited him, a single table, a dozen officials seated around it, military uniforms, civilian suits, and the unmistakable presence of scientists whose eyes burned with sleepless obsession. One of the officials, a woman with iron-gray hair and a calm but commanding voice, gestured to a chair. "Dr. Reeves, thank you for joining us," Jonathan sat. "I didn't exactly have a choice." She didn't smile. "You're right. You didn't. But perhaps once you've heard what we have to say, you'll understand why." They dimmed the lights. A projector filled the wall with images of 3I Atlas, sharp, high-resolution photographs, far beyond anything Jonathan had seen online. The green glow of the comet shimmered, its twin tails stretching like wings. Then came something else, infrared scans. Deep within the comet's core, faint shapes appeared. Angular, geometric, not natural, Jonathan's breath caught. "That's impossible." "No," the woman said quietly. "It's real. We've confirmed it with 3 separate instruments, structures, cavities, machines. Whatever's inside 3I Atlas, it was built." The room fell silent. Jonathan could hear his own heartbeat. For years, he had dreamed of proof that we weren't alone. And now it was here, undeniable. Why keep this secret? He asked. A general leaned forward, his medals glinting in the dim light. "Because people panic. Because religions fracture. Because governments collapse. The truth is a bomb, Professor, and once it's dropped, there's no taking it back." Another scientist spoke, her voice soft but firm. "But hiding it won't stop what's coming. The comet is on approach. It will pass within less than 2 astronomical units of Earth. The whole world will see it grow brighter. We cannot keep it hidden forever." The gray-haired woman raised a hand, silencing the debate. Her eyes fixed on Jonathan. "You heard the signal, didn't you?" Jonathan hesitated. "Yes, a voice," it said. "Prepare." Murmurs rippled through the room. The woman nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "You are not the first to hear it," she said. "And you won't be the last." Jonathan felt the weight of the room pressing in on him. "So what happens now? Do we reach out? Do we answer them?" The general's voice was sharp. "No, absolutely not. We don't know what they want. We don't know if they're hostile. We wait, we watch. And if necessary, we defend ourselves." "Defend ourselves," Jonathan repeated. "Against something that's traveled for millions of years across the galaxy. You think missiles will matter?" The general's jaw tightened. "We'll do what we must," the woman cut in again. "Enough. This isn't about weapons. It's about readiness. Professor Reeves, you've been chosen because you recognized the signal when others ignored it. We believe it's no accident that you heard the voice. Perhaps," she paused, searching for words, "perhaps they intended for you to hear it." Jonathan stared at her. "Why me? I'm nobody. Just a retired teacher." "Sometimes," she said softly, "that's exactly who they speak to. Not the powerful, not the generals, the ordinary, the overlooked. Those willing to listen." For the next hours, they showed him more data. Strange chemical signatures in the comet's tail, radio bursts that didn't match any known natural source, subtle fluctuations in Earth's own magnetic field, timed exactly with the pulses from 3I Atlas. And slowly, Jonathan began to see the shape of it. The comet wasn't just approaching the solar system. It was interacting with it, adjusting, aligning as though it were preparing to stop. When the lights came back on, the gray-haired woman looked at him with eyes that seemed far older than her face. "Dr. Reeves, we don't know what will happen when 3I Atlas reaches its closest point, but we believe you are connected to this. And whether you want to be or not, you're part of what comes next." That night, Jonathan lay in a cold government bed, unable to sleep. The walls hummed faintly, as if even the concrete itself carried the echo of the comet's pulse. He closed his eyes, and once more the voice came to him, not through radios or machines, but inside his own mind. Soon, the word vibrated in his chest like thunder. And for the first time, Jonathan felt not just wonder, not just fear, but something else, recognition, as if somehow they already knew him. By September, the secret was impossible to keep. What had been a dim speck on astronomers' charts now glowed like a green star in the evening sky. Amateur skywatchers could find it with binoculars. Newspapers ran front-page photos. Social media buzzed with speculation, a comet, a UFO, a harbinger of change. Governments still called it Three-Eye Atlas, still released dry press statements about no threat to Earth. But behind the careful language, even ordinary people sensed it. This was different. This was not just another comet. For Jonathan, it was a strange mix of vindication and dread. He had been moved into a secure facility near Washington, given a badge, a laptop, and access to information that would have seemed science fiction only months ago. Yet every day he felt further from his old life, from the porch, the desert, the quiet nights with his telescope. He spent long hours in a windowless room, listening to the pulse from Three-Eye Atlas. It had changed. Once a simple heartbeat, now it had grown more complex. A lattice of tones, almost like a melody. The analysts called it noise. Jonathan heard meaning. Sometimes in dreams he saw them. Tall, radiant figures moving through ice-walled corridors. Hands, or something like hands, touching a console of living crystal. And always a sense of waiting. Out in the world, the debate raged. On one channel, retired generals warned of invasion. On another, theologians argued over prophecy. Scientists called for an international summit. Conspiracy theorists posted videos of green lights in the sky. Through it all, the comet kept coming. NASA's latest projections showed it would pass its closest point to Earth in late October, still millions of kilometers away, but so bright by then it would cast faint shadows at night. For the first time in history, everyone on Earth would see the same visitor from beyond the stars. Late one evening, Jonathan was summoned to the main briefing room. The gray-haired woman was waiting, flanked by a dozen officials. On the wall behind them glowed a fresh image from the James Webb Space Telescope, a photograph so clear it seemed almost like a painting. At the very center of the comet's glowing coma, a dark shape could now be seen. Not a rock, not ice, a structure, long, curved, symmetrical, unmistakably artificial, a ship. Jonathan's knees went weak. All his life he had wanted proof. Now staring at the image, he felt tears sting his eyes. "They're slowing," the woman said quietly. "The object's velocity has begun to drop relative to the sun. No natural comet can do that." "What do they want?" Jonathan asked. "We don't know." The general cut in, voice like steel. "We have contingency plans, but we need you to keep listening. You're still the only one who claims to understand them." Jonathan almost laughed. "Understand? I don't even know if I'm sane." The woman's gaze softened. "Sanity or not, you're our bridge. Whether we like it or not, they're speaking through you." That night, back in his room, Jonathan felt the pulse again, but not in the speakers, in his own heartbeat. He closed his eyes, and the green light filled his mind. The voice returned, layered and harmonic, no longer a single word, but a phrase. "Arrival. Soon." "Do not fear," Jonathan whispered into the empty room. "Who are you?" The answer came not in words, but in a rush of images. A world of three suns, oceans of silver mist, beings of light standing in circles of stone. A sense of exile, of distance, of searching. And then, unmistakably, a feeling of reaching out, contact. Jonathan awoke at dawn, trembling. He no longer doubted. Whatever Three-Eye Atlas carried, it was alive. It was intelligent, and it was trying to be heard. Outside, the comet brightened still more. In small towns and big cities alike, people gathered at night to watch the green star rise. Some prayed, some sang, some simply stared in silence. For the first time in generations, humanity looked up together, and far above, within the glowing shell of Three-Eye Atlas, the passengers began to move. Panels unfolded. Lights flickered. A course adjusted. The long journey was almost over. By mid-October, the world could no longer look away. In the evening sky, Atlas blazed like a ghostly lantern, its green glow stretching across the horizon. Children pointed at it from city balconies. Old farmers watched it rise over their fields. Sailors at sea whispered prayers as it hovered above the waves. The news called it the Visitor. Churches filled with anxious crowds. Poets wrote lines about the green eye of heaven. Even those who never cared about space felt its presence. It was no longer an abstract object in the void. It was here, watching, and it was slowing. NASA confirmed what Jonathan already sensed. The comet's velocity was dropping in unnatural increments, as if unseen engines were fighting against gravity itself. It wasn't just passing through. It was preparing to stop. In the secure facility, Jonathan was no longer treated as a guest. He was treated as a necessity. Every night he listened to the pulse. Every morning he reported what he felt, what he dreamed. And the dreams were growing stronger. He saw vast halls of crystal lit by soft emerald light. He heard voices layered like music, blending into chords that shook the soul. He saw beings, tall, luminous, standing at the edges of his vision. Never fully revealed, but always present, always waiting. And then, 3 nights before the comet's closest approach, he saw something else. Earth, blue oceans, white clouds. The fragile arc of atmosphere, but seen not from his eyes, from theirs. He woke gasping, drenched in sweat. He knew then, with absolute certainty, they were here for us. The government was breaking under the strain. In secret meetings, Jonathan heard the cracks. Generals calling for missile batteries, scientists begging for restraint, politicians arguing over who would speak for humanity if contact came. At one heated session, Jonathan slammed his fist on the table. "You don't understand. They're not threatening us. They're reaching out. If you meet them with fear, you'll destroy the one chance we have to step beyond ourselves." The general glared at him. "You're asking me to gamble the survival of our species on faith in a dream?" Jonathan met his stare. "Yes, because that's what this is. Faith. In them, in us. In the possibility that the universe is more than war and suspicion." The room fell silent. For a moment, even the general had no reply. 2 days later, the first incident occurred. Over the Arizona desert, not far from Jonathan's old home, pilots reported a shimmering arc of green light hanging in the sky. Instruments failed. Radios went dead. Planes diverted. Locals on the ground described a doorway of light opening above the mesas. Some swore they saw figures within it, silhouettes too tall and too bright to be human. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the light vanished. The footage spread online before authorities could suppress it. Millions watched in awe and terror, and for the first time, doubt spread even among the skeptics. On the eve of the comet's closest pass, Jonathan was escorted to an observation deck deep within the facility. A glass dome stretched above him, offering a clear view of the night sky. And there it was, Atlas, enormous now, its green glow bathing the desert in eerie twilight. The twin tails arched across the stars like wings. And at its heart, faint but visible, the dark structure pulsed with inner light. Jonathan felt his chest tighten. Tears blurred his vision. He whispered, not to the officials watching, not to himself, but to them, "We're here. We're listening." And the answer came, not through radios, not through dreams, through the sky itself. The green glow brightened, flared, and for a heartbeat the night turned into emerald day. A single clear tone rang out across the world, heard in every ear, felt in every chest. It was not words. It was welcome. In villages and cities, on mountains and ships, humanity stood frozen, united by a sound older than fear. Dogs lifted their heads. Children stopped crying. The sick, the weary, the lonely, all felt it. And in that silence after, every human heart knew the truth. The visitors had arrived. The world held its breath. For centuries, people had looked to the stars and wondered. For months, they had watched the green comet draw near. But nothing, not faith, not science, not imagination, could have prepared them for what happened next. On the night of October 30th, as 3I Atlas reached its closest point to Earth, the comet changed. The brilliant coma dimmed, folding inward like a veil being drawn aside. The twin tails dissolved into space. And at the heart of it all, the dark structure emerged. It was vast, larger than any city, larger than mountains. A curved vessel of crystal and metal, its surface alive with flowing green light. Not a comet, not a rock, a ship, and it was slowing, settling into an orbit that carried it gently past Earth, close enough to be seen in detail with the naked eye. For the first time in human history, an alien craft revealed itself openly. Inside the government facility, Jonathan pressed his hands to the glass, tears streaming down his face. The officials around him stood silent, awe replacing argument. Even the hardened general could only whisper, "My God." Then the signal came, not just a pulse, not just a hum, but a full cascade of sound and light. Screens in the control room lit up with streams of data. Radios crackled, phones buzzed. Even pacemakers and hearing aids seemed to vibrate with the same rhythm. The message was everywhere, impossible to ignore. And Jonathan understood it, not in words, but in the way one understands music. In the way a child understands a lullaby before knowing language. It was greeting, invitation, and reassurance all at once. "They're asking to be seen," Jonathan whispered. "They want to show themselves." Moments later, the sky obeyed. From the ship's surface, arcs of emerald light stretched downward, piercing the clouds. They touched oceans, deserts, forests, cities. Wherever the beams fell, people looked up and saw them, figures of light. Not machines, not monsters, but tall, graceful beings that seemed woven of energy and form together. Their faces were indistinct, shifting like flame, but their presence radiated calm. They did not speak aloud, yet every human watching felt the same words inside. "We come in peace. We have traveled long. We seek not to conquer, but to share." Across the world, people wept. Some dropped to their knees in prayer. Others reached out their hands to the sky. For once, the divisions of race, nation, and creed fell silent. Humanity listened as one, and Jonathan felt them most of all. He saw images flooding his mind, their world of 3 suns, their departure long ago, the endless dark between stars. They had carried not armies, but knowledge, a seed of their civilization, searching for a home, searching for a kindred spirit in the universe. And now, after millennia of wandering, they had found Earth. "You called," their voices whispered within him. "And we heard." Jonathan realized with a shock the Arecibo message, the signals humanity had sent into the void decades earlier. They had answered it. They had followed it. Humanity had not been alone in reaching out. Back in the control room, chaos erupted. The general barked into a phone, demanding defenses stay ready. Scientists argued over protocols. Politicians worried about borders and power, but Jonathan tuned it all out. He knew this was bigger than nations, bigger than fear. He stepped forward, pressed his hand to the glass and whispered, "Welcome." And for a fleeting moment, one of the beings turned its face toward him. It smiled, not with lips, but with light, and Jonathan understood. They had chosen him not for power, not for rank, but for the simplest of reasons. He had listened all across Earth. People stared at the sky that night, knowing life would never be the same. Some were afraid, some were hopeful, some were both at once. But all of them knew the world had crossed a threshold. Humanity was no longer alone. The question was not whether the visitors had come. The question was, what would we do now? The days that followed were unlike any in human history. Every night the ship glowed in orbit, brighter than the moon, casting soft green light over oceans and continents. People gathered in parks, on rooftops, in open fields, simply to watch. Strangers spoke to each other in hushed voices, sharing the same awe. The visitors did not descend, did not land, did not demand. They only revealed themselves, hovering in beams of light, visible to all who dared to look up. They spoke no single language, but their presence carried meaning deeper than words. We are here. We are listening. We are waiting. And for the first time in centuries, humanity was forced to ask itself, not what divided us, but what united us. Jonathan became a reluctant messenger. Reporters demanded interviews. Governments demanded his cooperation. He was flown to summits where presidents and prime ministers argued over who would represent Earth. He tried to explain that the visitors weren't asking for leaders or armies or treaties. They want to know us, he said again and again. Not our flags, not our weapons, us, but power does not yield easily. Some nations scrambled jets, others tested missiles, a few even fired into the sky, and every time the weapons simply vanished into green light, harmless, absorbed without malice. The visitors responded not with anger, but with silence. As if a parent patiently enduring a child's tantrum, the message was clear: violence had no place here. One night, alone beneath the observation dome, Jonathan asked the question that had haunted him since the beginning. Why me? The answer filled him like a tide. Not a voice, but a knowing, because he had looked up when others looked away. Because he had listened without fear. Because in the vast desert silence of his life, he had left space for wonder. He was not a scientist of renown, not a general, not a politician. He was simply a man who loved the stars enough to hear their song. And sometimes that was enough. On the last night of October, the visitors gave one final gift. The beams of light widened, connecting continents. For a few brief minutes, the entire Earth was bathed in emerald glow. And within that light, every person felt something deeply personal. A memory, a healing, a reminder of love once lost, or a spark of courage long buried. A soldier in Ukraine dreamed of his daughter's laughter. An old woman in Brazil felt her husband's hand as if he were still alive. A child in India saw visions of a future without hunger. Billions of souls, each touched in their own way, all at once. Then, just as gently, the glow receded. The ship shifted, turning its course back toward the stars. They were leaving. The world cried out, some in grief, some in relief. But Jonathan understood. They had not come to stay. They had come to show. To remind humanity that the universe was vast, that kindness was possible, that we were not alone. And with that knowledge, they returned to the dark, their green glow fading beyond the orbit of the moon, then into the black between worlds. But the silence they left behind was not empty. It was filled with questions, with hope, with the first trembling notes of a new chapter for humankind. Jonathan returned once more to his desert home. The telescope still sat on the porch, pointed at the endless sky. He sat beside it, older now, but no longer alone. For he knew that out there, across impossible distances, someone was listening still, and sometimes, on the quietest nights, he swore he could feel it, that faint, steady pulse in his chest, not just a comet, not just a ship, a promise. And so the story of Three-Eye Atlas became not a tale of fear, but of wonder, a reminder that the universe is far wider than our quarrels. And that sometimes hope comes on a green light from the stars. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel because the next tale may be closer than you think.